Hey guys, welcome to She Knows Arsenal Daily, keeping you up to date on all things Arsenal. So make sure you guys like this video and subscribe to the channel. Bayern Munich are interested in Tomiyasu. So according to this report from Bloody Goal, Arsenal defender Takahiro Tomiyasu was a hot topic for Bayern last summer. Reason for Bayern's interest is that the Japanese player can play center back and right back. Well, we know that. And a January move is quite unrealistic as Tomiyasu will be at the Asia Cup with Japan. It's also unrealistic because he's our player and we probably don't want to sell him. But nevertheless, Bayern will keep monitoring the player situation towards a potential move next summer. You know, Bayern have been getting on my nerves over the last couple of months. I mean, whether it was going after Declan Rice or whatever. Can you go away? Can you leave us alone, please? I mean, he's our gem. He's our Tommy. Like, we just are now seeing the best of Tommy. And as soon as we start seeing the best out of Tommy, here you come wanting to take him away from us. So I had tweeted about this and basically to show my disgust towards this report, right? Because obviously I don't want Tomiyasu to go anywhere, right? But most of the response was Tommy's not going anywhere. And then there were some people that were like, you know, get to the summer, reconvene and see, you know, what's going on. And so everybody has their price. Everybody is not untouchable. When we did our tier list over the summer, Tomiyasu was not an untouchable for me. He was more like we want to keep him, but, you know, the circumstances could make it so that maybe you would consider moving him on. You know, if he doesn't maintain his fitness, if a team comes in with a suitable bid, if we feel like we're well stocked in that position and we can move him on. You know, I think that if Timber were available, people would feel a lot more open to allowing Tomiyasu to go somewhere else, right? Because on that side, we would have had the ability to use Timbers, and Zinchenko's there, and Kiwior's there. And really, Tomiyasu could fill in at the right, so can Timber. So I think the narrative on Tommy has really shifted from the beginning of the season till now because of Timber's injury, because Timber would have been more, I think, of a starter, or he would be filling in these positions where Tommy is now filling them in. So now his role in the team is a lot more, his role in the team is a lot bigger, I think, than we anticipated at the beginning of the season. And he's really become quite a big, like, hero for us with Timber out, with the uncertainty around Zinchenko defensively. He's really come in and been able to shore us up. He's very reliable on the ball. He's a great defender. And so I love that the narrative on Tommy has changed. That being said, he's definitely not untouchable, but would I even consider like anything at this stage right now? Absolutely not. Because he's probably he's our defensive version right now of Trossard. Those are players that I don't think you get rid of. I think you look at some of the other players around there and say, okay, what are you up to? What are you up to? I'm still trying to understand what Kiwior's role is going to be. I think that's very significant in regards to like the whole Tomiyasu thing. But all in all, Bayern can kick rocks. You know, you don't have the defenders that you need. Tough shit. You know, we're well stocked here, but we're not trying to give any of our goodies away. Okay. Now this ties in really nicely to the reports around Arsenal being ready to set up contract talks or open contract talks with Tomiyasu. So a lot of times, like, these rumors come out around the same time as contract talks are about to start. I don't know. I guess it's the agent, right? And, you know, Tomiyasu, I do think, is somebody that we probably want to get on a new deal so that if we were to want to move him on, we could get maximum fee that you could possibly get. Keep his contract long. It's something that Arsenal have been doing very well lately. Ben White's contract is now in the pipeline and almost done. But we've seen, like, with the likes of Odegaard, Ramsdale, Saka, these players to leave it. Like, all these players have gotten new deals quite quickly. And so Tomiyasu is just the next person up. He just turned 25, so he's just barely touching his prime now. So there's no rush to move Tommy on, but equally you want to set yourself up in a good position just in case you decide to move him on. And I've said this quite a few times that I don't actually think a contract extension necessarily means that a player is untouchable. And I feel like that should be like obvious. You know, I don't think giving somebody a new contract automatically means that they're a part of the long-term future of the team. You know, and when I say long-term, I mean 3, 4, 5 years. Like, in the short term, I do believe Tomiyasu is important to the team. But in 2, 3 seasons, he may not be, because Timber will be there. Maybe Kiwior develops a little bit more. Maybe we bring in another center defender, which seems likely based on reports that we're looking at Diomande and Mark Gahey as more options. So it's just a good idea and a best practice to get these contracts underway. So I'm happy about it. So in terms of Bayern, of course, like, no, not interested in that whatsoever. But in Tommy getting a new contract, absolutely. Arsenal have been handed a big blow in their pursuit of Andre because Fulham are close to signing him. I think this is really, obviously this is connected to Paulinho probably still being on the radar and on the agenda of Bayern in the January transfer window. If you guys remember, João Paulinho from Fulham was very close to signing for Bayern this past summer. Their defensive midfielder, one of the best DMs in the Premier League, very good pickup for Fulham, was very, very close to signing for Bayern. He was literally in Munich. He was literally in Munich and they couldn't get it done on time. I don't know if you guys remember this, but Bayern were an absolute mess in the transfer window this past window. They're usually really good with their business, but it did kind of seem like scattergun approach. Like, this is probably the first time in their history where they're not everybody's like number one choice. Like, people are not dying to go to Bayern right now. That could change very quickly, by the way. But as of right now, they had a very difficult time trying to like lure players to Bayern that typically probably would have went. But their pursuit of a DM was long. It took like the entire transfer window, I remember. And then they got Paulinho all the way there, taking the pictures. It was very much like Dan James when he was supposed to go to, what team was that he was supposed to go to? I think it was Dan James. It was Dan James. He was supposed to go somewhere. You guys will let me know. But and it was like he was so close to signing and then they just couldn't get it done. Now, Bayern aren't just going to abandon that. They're definitely going to revisit it in January. The sticky thing about January is that big transfers like that, the selling club is going to have to line up a replacement. And so the replacement that Fulham are lining up is Andre from Fluminense. And he is a target of Liverpool and Arsenal. And he's a very good target because he's available in January. The problem that Arsenal are always going to face in trying to recruit somebody for their midfield is that the type of player that they probably want is a player that is very integral to the team that they would be leaving, i.e. Douglas Luiz, i.e. Zubimendi, whatever. And so having somebody like an Andre who's playing in the Brazilian league, so the Brazilian league will allow you to leave in January. It's an ideal time because of the way their calendar is set up. He would be available and for a smaller fee, like 35 million euros, I think it is. That's very attainable. That's very attainable for an Arsenal or a Liverpool. And Arsenal really need a player to come in. We know that. Now, what also stands out to me is that no shade, but if Fulham are the team that ends up with him, then I feel like that might kind of be his level at this stage. At this stage, I'm not saying that means that he cannot become something better. He could very well. He could very much end up. It could end up being the case that he stays at Fulham for a season and ends up going to Liverpool. We've seen that happen before, but him going to Fulham is kind of like, okay, maybe that's more of his level. Like he needs an adaptation to a smaller team. And maybe he's not somebody that could just jump straight into the fire at Arsenal in the middle of a title race, in the middle of Champions League, and get us over the line, right? But that would be one option off the table. And the options were already very limited because of the January window. So that is a blow for Arsenal, I think, because it just takes one guy off of the list for us. But there's still some options there. I do expect Arsenal to try to push for Ruben Neves. I think the loan option, the agent, the long-standing history, the availability, all those things kind of work in our favor. And hopefully the Premier League teams vote on not allowing him to be able to be loaned to Newcastle, and that makes it a little bit easier. Even though Ruben Neves is not a player that I particularly love a lot, you guys know on this channel I am a Ruben Neves hater since 2021. But, beggars can't be choosers, and your girl is desperate. And so a loan for Ruben Neves is looking really tasty right about now because I'm starved, okay, of like a decent midfield, right? And so one person off the list, still some options there, but this is what happens when you don't recruit properly in the summer. You end up looking in January and it's like, oh my gosh, what is going on? Like, this is not, to me, this is not, unfortunate injuries, really. It's not really the same as like last season when we got to the January transfer window. Since September, October, we have been discussing the January transfer window, which for me is a massive red flag in terms of recruitment, and how people feel about how the summer window went. A lot of people thought that our summer window was good, but there were a lot of people that did not think it was good based on one particular signing. I understand that. Havertz, it is what it is, And then once Timber got injured, it was like, okay, so basically we bought Rice, right? And that was it. And so I do think that having to go into the January transfer window and bring in a midfielder when Thomas Partey is never fit enough, and when you spent $65 million on Havertz, you do have to look at the powers that be and say, what were you thinking? This was not good. And it's funny because I feel like more money, more problems. I feel like our windows were maybe a little bit tighter and a little bit more straightforward and effective when we had less money. But the first window where we had a lot of money to splash the cash, we didn't do a very good job with it. I think the window that we bought Ramsdale, White, and Odegaard and Tomiyasu is a very good window for us because it set up our foundation quite well. And then the window after that with Zinchenko and Jesus, that's the one that took us up to, title challenging. It took us to being title challengers. Then this window, you have more money, and we just kind of brought ourselves to a standstill a little bit. Now, that could be harsh considering we didn't actually get to see what Timber can bring, but I feel like the assignment was pretty easy. Replace Xhaka with somebody better and let's go. Like, I feel like it was just that simple. And maybe bring in an attacker as well. Maybe don't get the goalkeeper with Raya. Let Ramsdale stay for another season. Knock that to the next summer window and use that 30 million or whatever to bring in an attacker or something like that. So speaking about the January window, a couple of months after you just spent 200 million is not a good sign. We've talked about that to death, but hopefully Arsenal have some other options in line if Andre does end up going to Fulham. But you guys let me know. Are you devastated about this? Do you care? Do you not? Or who would be your ideal choice? Because a lot of people were talking about this guy. So you guys will let me know. Odegaard is on track to return against Brentford. This is like music to my ears, you guys, because your girl was suffering. Okay, you guys know I love Odegaard, and I get that he was going through a difficult period before the break, but let's be real. once you heard about the injury, did you not feel bad about talking about him like a dog? Did you not? Did you not? If you were talking about him like a dog, do you not feel bad now? Do you not feel bad? Because he's clearly injured or going through something. I don't think Odegaard goes from being one of the best players in the league to what he was looking like without there being like a very valid explanation for it. Now, I'm not saying that there's like not a little bit of form issues, whatever, but really our entire team was kind of playing at a lower ebb, especially like our attackers. Like our attackers, they're persevering despite the situation, you know. We'll talk about whether or not like our attackers are persevering despite the situation, not because of it. I don't think listen, me and Alex from A Different Knock are actually going to talk about this on the podcast for Patreon in a couple of hours, actually. By the time this comes out, me and Alex will be recording. You know, so we're actually going to talk about this because Martinelli, a quote came out from Martinelli where he talked about the creativity and the movement that he's being able to have with Brazil and how that really suits him versus what happens at Arsenal. And so everybody as in an attacking sense for Arsenal, I do think we have to take into consideration that those levels have dropped based on the way that we're playing, right? And I think Odegaard is suffering quite a bit from that, suffering a little bit from not having, you know, maybe the right players behind him or the same setup behind him and not having Granit Xhaka there. I think anybody who is thinking like that is completely ignoring the fact that left center mid is like a big gaping hole is kidding themselves. Nevertheless, having him back and ready to play, which I do think that he was probably ready to play against Burnley, but we decided to keep him out so that he didn't go to Norway and put up unnecessary minutes in his legs. There was no reason to do it. But him being ready to come back into the December fixtures, hopefully fit and ready to go, is such a huge boost for Arsenal. I was having this conversation with a friend today about what Odegaard's ceiling is, like where he is and kind of like comparison to some of our other players. And I do think that I feel bad for Odegaard that like somebody that matched Kevin De Bruyne's record for the most goals scored by a midfielder in one season, how he can go from that player and a Ballon d'Or nominee to, oh my gosh, we need to move on from this guy in like the span of 3 months. But that's how fickle the fan base can be. That's how fickle football is. Like I had an about face on players before as well. So it can turn on and off like a light switch. I think a couple of good games for Odegaard and people will be right back on track. But I think a couple of good games for Odegaard and people will be right back on the bandwagon. But we haven't forgot who spoke about us poorly, right? But I'm happy to see this, especially because you know, Havertz is clearly going to be playing left back now, so we're not going to be able to play him at right center mid. No, I'm just joking. But we need our midfield to start to gel, and I think those two big pieces of Rice and Odegaard, they need to play with each other more often. They need to play with each other over and over and over again in order to gain that same level of like muscle memory that Odegaard, Xhaka, and Partey had. The problem that you have there as well is that like you have the moving piece of Jorginho / Havertz. Like sometimes Arteta will decide that he wants Havertz in there, so that moves Declan Rice to the 6th. And then sometimes he'll decide that he wants Jorginho in there, which moves Declan Rice up and Jorginho into the 6th. I'm not a huge fan of it, but it's normal for teams to switch players. So, you know, Odegaard has to get used to playing with different players in different positions. But I'm not sure either setup actually creates a good enough foundation for Odegaard. I really do think that like bringing somebody in January is almost like it's a necessity in order to get the best out of the players that we really need to be playing well in order for us to do anything, right? So Odegaard back on track. Excited to see him against Brentford. You guys will let me know about all the things we spoke about there. Martinelli will wear the number 7 and Gabriel Jesus will wear the number 9 in Brazil's World Cup qualifier against Argentina today. So I'm starting to get more and more excited about this game, but more and more fearful as the hours go by. I love rivalries. I love big matches. I love big rivalries when the chips are on the line, right? And these are World Cup qualifiers, so this is not a friendly. And even if it was a friendly, it would not be friendly. Let's be real. I'm excited to see our players start for Seleção in such an important. I am excited to watch our players play against Argentina in a big game. I'm excited. And even though, the numbers, whether you care about them or not, the players switch numbers all the time internationally because that's just what happens. Players go in and out, whatever. But I do think under this new coach that some of our players' influence is actually going to become a lot bigger. And again, while big players like Vinny and Neymar are out, it's important for Gabriel Jesus and Martinelli to stake a claim, I think, going into Copa America this coming summer. I'm super excited about that, by the way, you guys. It's going to be in the United States. I don't know if you guys have seen, but they've announced some of the cities. Los Angeles and Las Vegas are actually going to host the semifinals, and Miami is actually going to host the final. So there's that. But with Copa America coming up, I do think that this is just such a good opportunity for these players. Martinelli, a player that is just kind of getting his feet wet internationally. I think a player that needs international and Champions League football to gain the recognition that he deserves, because he doesn't have the natural backing of, England fans like Saka does. I think they should embrace Gabriel Jesus a little bit more, especially with the way that Diaz wants to play with a more fluid front three. That is absolutely Gabriel Jesus's bag. If you want to do fluid front three, there's not really that many better players out there to play in that way through the center than Gabriel Jesus. And so I'm super excited to see that Arsenal connection in a different team with a different set of tactics and see how it looks as well. Gabriel Jesus and Martinelli will start together, and we all know that they kind of have this little synergy that they've created at Arsenal, and it happened from day one. I've never seen it's so crazy to watch players that have never played with each other before come into a side and do this. It's just, yeah. And Gabriel Jesus and Martinelli definitely have that. So super excited for the game. Again, I think the biggest thing on most people's minds is don't get injured. We're in such a decent position right now with Odegaard coming back in. Saka and Declan Rice have looked like they've survived Southgate. So it's if we could just get Gabriel Jesus and Martinelli back into the team, and Gabriel Magalhaes as well, we go into the December period with a pretty strong squad. Basically just Thomas Partey and Timber out, which, obviously we'd be much stronger with them, but that's a strong team, so hoping for the best, hoping nobody gets injured. But I am really starting to become a lot more excited about this game, because this is going to be I am so sure something crazy is going to happen. I'm just so sure of it. You know what I mean? You get that feeling where you're this is going to be one of those games. And so definitely excited about that. You guys let me know how you guys are feeling ahead of Brazil, Argentina, and if you guys are going to watch. So I just touched on it there about Saka and Rice surviving Southgate. England were very poor against North Macedonia, but they had already qualified, and I think people have to take that into consideration, that once you've already qualified, I think it's really difficult to get up for games that don't really mean that much, you know what I mean? But they drew 1-1 to North Macedonia, and credit to North Macedonia. I thought that they played really well. I thought their game plan was really good, where they had lost to England before 7-0 or something like that. This time around, it was a completely different story. I think a lot of it was because of how aggressive they were, how they didn't give England any time. The pitch was not very good, but basically because Saka and Rice started, my whole thing was just get off the pitch without an injury. Get off the pitch without an injury. Just please do not get injured. We cannot suffer an injury with either one of these two players. And I thought by all accounts, like, they both played pretty well. I think Rice just is a Rolls Royce of a midfielder. I just think what he does best, he does better than 99% of DMs, right? And he's starting to flex that goal scoring gene as well, that goal scoring ability as well. He had a really nice shot against North Macedonia that hit the post. And so he's starting to really like flex those muscles a lot more, which is great. I thought he was really good, and they conceded a really unfortunate penalty. But it kind of evened itself out because Harry Maguire should have conceded a penalty earlier than that. And then so Rico Lewis had to kind of like suffer. And so it evened itself out, if that makes sense. But then Harry Kane came on and scored in like the first minute that he got onto the pitch. But Saka had actually set up Grealish for a goal a couple of minutes before that, but Grealish was offside. So as far as I'm concerned, like Saka had 2 assists and Rice had a goal. Even though VAR decided that Saka's assist and Declan Rice's goals didn't count. I'm counting them in my head. But as long as they survive that and that in the next couple of days we don't hear about any BS about injuries or anything like that, I think all in all this has been a pretty decent international break for the players that we're very afraid that could potentially end up with injuries or knocks or whatever. And just to finish up here, I wanted to talk about Ukraine because they were actually, I think, robbed of a clear penalty against Italy. This is a really important game for both sides to automatically qualify for the Euros. And Ukraine in the 90th minute had an opportunity to get into the box, and Mudryk is clearly fouled in the box and they just ignore it. And had Ukraine been able to get that penalty and convert, then Italy wouldn't have automatically qualified. Now, there's a little quote here from UEFA that I will pull up here in just a second when I get my life together, that UEFA president, says Italy are too important. They must qualify for Euro 2024, otherwise it will be a disaster. He said that on October 20th. And so it's kind of like one of those things where you're like, were they just kind of like going to turn a blind eye and make sure Italy got through, because like he said, they're just so important. I just don't understand how you could have looked at that and not saw that it was a penalty. VAR should have intervened. I mean, the way that VAR was intervening on every single England game, why couldn't they intervene here and give the penalty? It was a clear penalty. It was so strange not to give it to them. But I think Ukraine still have an opportunity to qualify. They just have to go through like another round of games and stuff like that. So, I feel bad for them. I really do. And Zinchenko and things like that. But, it's just another day, another bad decision, another glaring error out there where you have to question, like, is this just all a coincidence or not? I'm starting to get into like the conspiracies of like the powers that be conspiring against certain teams in certain countries and certain clubs, like to make sure that they get certain teams ahead and some not, but I feel really bad for Zinchenko and them. But that being said, I think they still have an opportunity to get into the Euros. So it is what it is. And if they don't make it, then Zinchenko gets to just sit his ass down. And so, it's a win-win. I feel like it's a win-win. But yeah, you guys let me know if you thought that was a clear penalty or not, or if I'm just deluded, but I'm looking at, I see a clear penalty, but you guys will let me know. All right, you guys, that's it for the show. Like I said, by the time you guys are watching this, I will be recording with Alex from A Different Knock for the Patreon podcast. Now, for those of you guys that haven't been paying attention, because I was accused the other day of not putting out any good content that was outside of the paywall. Now, I am offended by that because most days I put out at least one piece of free content, if not 2. But, basically that person was saying that the good conversations that you have with your good guests they're all behind the paywall. I'm like, well, I got to make money somehow, honey. But if you guys have not been paying attention, those post-match podcasts, because this technically should be a post-match podcast, but it's not because we didn't play. But these shows, I actually put out like a 15 to 25 minute like mini episode on YouTube so that you guys can see a little bit of it. Now, it's not the whole thing. I will probably record like an hour 15, hour 30 minutes with Alex. So yeah, you won't get to see all of it, but like, you know, at least I gave you something. You know what I mean? Content is so hard because like you, as a content creator, you do always kind of feel bad about trying to make a living off of it. Do you know what I mean? But at the same time, it's like, I got bills to pay. But that being said, like I put out that little bit so that you guys can at least be a part of the conversation and get a little additional piece of content, but also see what the Patreon content is like, because the Patreon content, I do think, does have a little bit more discussion. I do have really good guests on from a Patreon person. I do have really good guests on. And if you want to do a more in-depth discussion about our games and things like that, that's where you will find it. So for people that, you know, because it doesn't get as many views because I don't feel like you guys know that it's there. You know, I don't think you guys know that it's there. So just know that around 7 p.m. UK time, it will be a premiere on the channel. It'll be about 15 to 25 minutes, somewhere between there, of a clip of the show that I'm going to do with Alex from A Different Knock. And then if you guys want to watch the entire thing, you'll be able to try Patreon for free for 7 days when you sign up. And so you can literally just try it. And then if you don't like it, you don't have to really buy it. You know, but if you do like it and you like the content that's on there, you could stay. So I just wanted to remind you guys of that because I feel like you guys don't know that I put those out or what those are. They're just a piece of the podcast, you know, and I even put like the little things ahead that say like, this is a piece of a podcast that's on Patreon, and people are still like, what is this? You know, so I just want to put that out there. But 7 p.m. UK time, that will be out. Make sure you guys check that out. And if you guys want to become a patron, you guys can do that at patreon.com/SheKnowsArsenal. It's $4 a month. But if you can't do it or you don't want to, no problem, because you do know that I put out hella free content, you know, because your girl loves you, of course, because I love y'all. And in terms of like, obviously I'm American, so I'm going to be celebrating Thanksgiving on Thursday. So I'll have something come out, but don't expect anything besides that, you know, because I'm going to be indisposed. I'm going to be eating all day and hanging out with my family. And then we'll reconvene on Friday to gear up for Brentford. So yeah. I am going to end the show there. You guys, I enjoyed talking to you guys as usual. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.